let's chat a little bit about IT managed services, because they're very, very interesting. They basically involve providing a recurring service that occurs over a long period of time. So it's not a couple of months, it's generally a year, 2 years, 3 years. And the idea here is to outsource or have the client outsource some element of their organization.
Yes.
And one of the key areas we have focused on, but we have a number of areas which we'll get into, but one of the biggest areas is IT asset and software asset management. And we've partnered with a great company called BCS, which is Business Continuity Services. And they have a phenomenal software platform that does all of the analytics around software licensing. It's called Software Organizer. And so we run BCS's software in the background in our back office, and we basically deliver software license compliance, audit defense services, software optimization, contract optimization, process optimization around how IT assets are managed in an organization. We do this in a continuous improvement style over, in some cases, a period of years for our clients.
Yes.
And we've been able to do some enormous benefits for those clients.
For sure.
Maybe you could share with us some of your thoughts on our managed services and what you've seen.
So since I started with Knowsys Group over 6 years ago, one of the first engagements I was part of was a managed service for one of our large customers. And I noticed, our customers really enjoyed the benefit of this service because they don't always have the bandwidth to do this in-house. So they might not have the people or the expertise, because
yes, that's right.
When it comes to software licensing, you might have someone who's really great at Microsoft, but as you know, there's hundreds of different vendors and publishers, and the rules when it comes to installing these licenses and deploying them and knowing how to manage them, there's vastly different between everyone, and some are more complex than others.
Yes, especially on servers.
On servers, and virtualized environments. So our customers, really needed someone who had that all-around knowledge of how to manage software assets, and to do that on an ongoing basis, because unfortunately, when you don't have the bandwidth and you don't have the people in place or the budget even, you lend yourself and you open yourself up to a lot of risk, a lot of financial risk.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, just like anything, when at home you buy a license to use anything on your laptop, whether it's, Office 365 or any of the Adobe Creative Cloud products, and, you don't want to get your hands on a license that you didn't pay for, because at the end of the day, it's essentially stealing, right? So as a large organization where you have to be ethical and answer to your shareholders,
yes,
in some
your stakeholders,
and your stakeholders, in some cases, if it's government, the public, you want to make sure everything is done up to snuff. So when it comes to managing these licenses, we ensure that you're using what you've paid for. And then we look at that and say, hey, you don't need this many licenses. You've bought way more than you need. Let's call some back. Let's save you some money. Or on the flip side, maybe they've incorrectly, unknowing to themselves even, they've deployed something improperly, in the wrong environment. So they're actually on the hook for X times more licenses than they intended. So we're there to catch those slip-ups and make sure that when their dear vendors come knocking to do a yearly true-up or even just an audit, that they're protected and they have all their ducks in a row, and they can say, hey, this is our position. We know what we have. We know what we're using.
Yeah, and then the key too is using our back office and our software solution to come up with the position, not just this is our opinion, but here's the evidence. Here's all the data to demonstrate that we actually know exactly what's in our environment, what's deployed where, in what version, what operating system. And as a result, we've been able to provide enormous benefits to our clients. We had one client which was being audited by a large software vendor, and the vendor came to the client with their tally. Their tally was in, $30-something million new bill that would be owed to the vendor. And we were able, through, again, empirical evidence and data, demonstrate and show that, hey, no, you're wrong. It's not 30 million. In fact, it's less than $1 million that's owed. And that's huge. Can you imagine, a client or a client of ours, an organization, just automatically accepting what the vendor says, or even trying to negotiate the bill down? Let's say they negotiate it down halfway, meet halfway at the $15 million mark. They would have still paid 14 times more than what they actually had to.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, we have our managed services clients. That was an audit, a defense example. But on our managed services side, where we've done proactive baselining of various software vendors, and we have found risks of tens of millions of dollars, and we were able to advise the client on how to fix it proactively, because a lot of times you can't even fix the problem overnight.
No.
Because you have to re-architect your whole data center in some cases, for some vendors like Oracle as an example.
Yeah.
And anyways, we were able to inform the client as to what needed to be done, and they ended up initiating a huge project to re-architect.
Yes.
And that project took some time, but because they had the due diligence, they knew what they were doing. When the vendor did eventually come calling and said to the client, you owe us these additional monies, the client actually had a very strong position, negotiating position. And their position was, look, we know we're offside, but this is what we're doing to fix it. We're going to be buying more software from you, but here's the plan.
Yeah.
And that's so much more powerful than just reacting. And so they were able to dodge the $20 million bullet from the vendor.
Yeah.
And instead of just paying more money for licenses that are improperly deployed, they were able to buy or invest in new architecture that gave them incredible benefits from a number of business perspectives.
Absolutely. And so, in addition to the, whether it's an audit or a monthly compliance position you're getting, we can also help set you up in terms of the process and the governance, because that's very important. And if you are wanting to grow your SAM team and get the few people that you have trained up to eventually have a repeatable process to ensure that shadow IT isn't happening, that people aren't just purchasing licenses willy-nilly, and also even just as simple as keeping track of all of these proof of entitlements and all of these purchase orders that go hand in hand with buying new software, because oftentimes the taxonomy and the naming conventions of all of these files and pieces of data, it's all over the place, and it makes it very cumbersome and difficult if you don't have a process in place for when you do get audited, and how do you find the information?
And then the other element is contract renewals too. When you renew a contract, again, you want to be negotiating from a position of power, not a position of ignorance or lack of knowledge. So with our service, we're basically providing that power, that capability, that insight into the data, so that the client can negotiate more effectively. And again, back to your point about taxonomy and a proof of entitlements, there are a lot of things that need to be done from a governance perspective that have to change, because if you don't change those things, you keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again, and you keep getting into the same terrible situations. And so our job is to prevent our clients from getting into those situations, kind of like a good, marriage counselor, if you will. We prevent them from getting into the arguments or fights, but instead of with a spouse, more with a vendor that they that's an important partner for them.